I was in New Orleans recently, New Orleans, Louisiana. What percentage of the people of New Orleans are religious maniacs? It's hard to pin down. I don't think anyone is doing serious social science research into it. I don't think anyone is seriously politically concerned about this or what the short-term or long-term consequences might be. If you go to New Orleans as a tourist, you just walk the streets at night. In our case, we don't drink, we don't gamble. We go to live comedy, see stand-up comedy. You might have the misleading impression that the people of New Orleans are predominantly secular with modern, ironical, detached attitudes toward religion. But no, those are just the people you're meeting, the places you're going. In fact, visibly and invisibly, you're surrounded by religious maniacs. What percentage of the population of Israel consists of religious maniacs? Now, this is relatively thoroughly studied and thoroughly documented, but nevertheless, you can imagine the problems you get into. Your definition of religious maniac may not be the same as mine. The people engaged in that kind of research, they're probably quite sympathetic towards religion, whereas I'm a nihilistic atheist, right? Is it 30%? Is it 50%? Is it 60%? And now for any of these case studies, any of these placed under the microscope and evaluate what their likely future is going to be. What percentage of people in plain English are stupid? It's a particular kind of stupid I want to get into in this video. What percentage of people are so stupid that you know with the passage of time they're not going to be able to work their way out of this binding ideology, this set of beliefs that they've been raised to valorize? A tiny percentage of people are brilliant enough, strong-willed enough to rebel against the wisdom of their ancestors, the wisdom of their own parents and grandparents, their school teachers and school principals, so on and so forth. But a huge percentage of the population are not. A huge percentage of the population are never going to think for themselves. And you can't do the thinking for them. And the reality of religious mania, it looks very different in Los Angeles, Las Vegas, New Orleans, Jerusalem. But in any one of those places, you are really surrounded by religious maniacs, whether you're willing to see it or not. Los Angeles may have the highest percentage of atheists of any city in the United States of America. It's commonly claimed. But guess what? The religious people are organized. The religious people have foundations and backing of millions of dollars. And the atheist people, the secular people, the free-thinking people don't. Now, within Israel, to cut to the chase here, the stupid people are organized. That's the problem with Israel. And it's not a short-term problem. And it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. The stupid people are organized. Their organization has financial backing in the millions of dollars, in the tens of millions of dollars, in the hundreds of millions of dollars. There was a leaked report about just how much wealth the Mormon church has secretly amassed in the United States of America. If you Google this, you're going to get results. Who do you think? Who do you think has more money backing them? And Mormonism is a tiny, unpopular religion. It's a laughingstock. And they're getting into the hundreds of millions and the billions because year after year, people donate 10% of their income. And the Mormon church is not taking that money and playing blackjack with it. It accumulates, it's invested, the investments pay dividends. How much money, just any mainstream religion, without getting into small cult groups, huge scandal right now in Japan about one of their tiny cult groups that was implicated very indirectly, I might add, in the assassination of their former prime minister. So the cult themselves didn't assassinate the prime minister, so I won't get into the details there. But anyway, there was a scandal involving the assassination of the former prime minister that suddenly directed public attention towards this cult group. It's a small, unpopular cult group, and it sure is amazing how much money it has amassed. Okay, the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, any mainstream form of Judaism, okay, there's a lot of money. And that money gives these institutions staying power. It gives them reach. It means that their influence in society is not a fad. And over the last 20 years, I think everyone in my audience will agree with me, over the last 20 years, guess what? Atheism was a fad. It came and it went. I wish that wasn't true, but it's the truth. And veganism was a fad. Past tense. It came and it went. I'm going to say a little bit about the context for my hitting record and performing this live stream right now. My discovery of this new documentary, it's in the title of this video and I have a link to it, Christspiracy, came about as follows. I was reflecting on just how the vegan demi-monde has imploded. Veganism as a scene, veganism as an intellectual scene, as a political scene, as a subculture within YouTube. Vegans just as a group of people who even talk to each other. The extent to which that's imploded and collapsed and ceased to exist. It's like, here I am. Wayne Seong is in jail. Wayne, and his last name is spelled H-S-I-U-N-G. Wayne Seong, he's a Chinese American, but born and raised in America, went to school in America. He speaks English fluently. It's a Chinese name, but he is really an American political figure, an American political activist, and also a lawyer, and so on. Wayne Seong has been a part of my life for like 10 years. And if you've been rolling heavy with the vegan movement for years, some of you have never heard of the guy before. That's why I spelled his name. I get it. Okay. Wayne Seong has been the leader of an organization with a budget above $1 million per year, year after year for many years. And anyone in their right mind would admit it has been one of the most powerful and influential foundations in the vegan movement in the last 10 years. If you talk about the last 100 years, it's going to be a different list, but within the last 10 years, Wayne Seong has been one of the most powerful people, the founder and leader and head of one of the most powerful organizations. And that is why I criticize him so harshly. He's worth criticizing. His philosophy is worth cross-examining. This is worth talking about. All right. Not one person sent me an email. Not one person sent me a Facebook message saying, man, can you believe it? Today, Wayne has the handcuffs on. Wayne's in jail. It finally happened. Nobody wrote to me. I've known so many people who are either current members of his organization or former members. I've had some interviewed on this channel. As a matter of fact, I've been a well-known kind of critic and raconteur and contemporary of these people for, I don't know, at least 8 years, but getting closer to 10 years now. I've been talking about this on the internet. All right. And I went to YouTube and I put into the search bar vegan, and then I added the criterion that I only want results from the last 7 days. And I'm hitting page down. I'm going through all these results to try to find just one video that is in any way discussing or responding to the fact that Wayne Xiong is now in jail, that the saga of DXT, the saga of his form of activism, has finally come to a conclusion, has come to an end with him being judged guilty and put in jail. I just mentioned his sentencing hasn't come up, so he's now in prison in the brief period of time between when the trial judges you guilty and when the duration of time you're going to spend in jail. All right. Now, I put a loop on Instagram, so I don't know if it's 15 seconds long or what. It's a short video on Instagram in which I'm making it clear that I'm happy Wayne is in jail. I wish he'd gone to jail 8 years ago, 10 years ago, some of this. The whole vegan movement would be a better position today if he had gone to jail much earlier than this. And again, I'm not saying you'd have to agree with me. Not one person has talked to me about this. Not one person has sent me an email or an Instagram DM or what have you. And by the way, during the same few days, people sent me messages about all kinds of things. I mean, I do, members of my audience, some of you here know, members of my audience talk to me about what's going on in my life, or talk to me about politics, or talk to me about Israel, or talk to me about religion. I had some emails about religion and atheism just in the last few days. It's true. People do talk to me, right, at any given time. Right? There is no interest in, there's no reaction to Wayne being in jail, the mere fact of it. And there's no interest in and no reaction to my saying, yeah, I'm glad. Now, I'm just going to make a brief digression here. If veganism is your movement, fight for the future of it. Do not let the future of the vegan movement be controlled by Wayne Xiong. Do not let it be controlled by Kip Anderson, the director of Cowspiracy, now the director of Christspiracy, the subject we're coming to. If this is your movement, right, you have to lay claim to it. You have to step up. There are people watching this video who are all different ages. Right? There's a famous joke about the philosopher Diogenes. I remember when I heard this joke too. So this is from ancient Greek and Latin literature. It's an old joke, but I was very young when I read it and learned it. And the joke goes, this is probably not historically relevant. It's probably a funny story that was made up about this philosopher after the fact. But he would go to see his mother, I think for lunch every day. It was something that he'd go and meet his mother was an elderly woman. He'd go and eat lunch with his mother. And his mother would say to him every day, when are you going to get married? When are you going to settle down? When are you going to get married? And he'd say, Mother, I'm too young. Mother, I'm still too young. So every day he tells his mother, I'm too young to get married. And then one day he went to visit his mother and he said, Mother, I'm too old. And then every day after that, his excuse was that he was too old. There are some people in my audience who will say, oh, okay, easy for you to say, challenge the leadership of the vegan movement, challenge the direction the vegan movement is going in. And I have the exact same thing to say about atheism. You want, if atheism is your movement, if atheism is your cause, are you going to leave it in the hands of? You have to take it into your own hands. You have to. But I get it. If you're 14 watching this, I understand. No, you're still playing with dolls, whatever. If you're 16 watching this, I get it. You just don't feel ready yet, intellectually or otherwise. Okay? But most people go through their lives, as in this apocryphal anecdote about Diogenes, where it's one excuse after another. And one of the most common excuses is that you're too young until one day you're too old. And I meet the people who are too old too. There are people who say, oh, well, I'm 65. I can't be influential in the vegan movement. That's for young, sexy people like Earthling Ed. Like, really, they see it that way. They think they're too old to be influential or matter in a political movement. And this is certainly true with atheism too, paradoxically. Some people think they're too young. Some people think they're too old to matter. And no, your opinion is going to matter in as much as you make it matter. Okay, to return to the narrative, why I'm making this video at the particular time that I am today. Looking through the search results just for the word vegan. Now, there was a time when YouTube channels would have not been freaking out over Wayne Xiong going to jail. Again, even if you don't like that, I don't like the guy. Whether you love him or hate him, there might be people who are supporters freaking out about it, people who are his harshest critics freaking out about it. There is a time when there would have been banter going back and forth. And there was a time when there would have been critics of the movement going after me, saying, hey, look, here's this terrible thing that's happened with Wayne Xiong going to jail. And look at old man Mazard. Look at à-bas-le-ciel. Look at what he's saying about it. This is terrible, which is fine. When it comes to political freedom of speech, steel sharpens steel. We all get sharper this way. I would encourage people to disagree with me and criticize me and examine their own views and criticize their own views. There could be a lively debate or discourse going on about this today. I can give you two examples off the top of my head. I remember when Freely retired, and I made a video really pointing the finger at her and really harshly criticizing, condemning her at that time for retirement. And there was, again, all those other voices were there in the cacophony. There were people celebrating her and people criticizing her and people criticizing me and so on. Okay. And I remember when Gary Yourofsky retired, right? So, I could repeat the same thing. There was this whole cacophony. All right. Well, again, I am Wayne Xiong's harshest critic. Within the last 10 years, who has been a more important person for the history of the vegan movement? Wayne Xiong, Gary Yourofsky, or Freely the banana girl? Of course it's Wayne Xiong. And Wayne Xiong going to prison is of some significance. So I'm hitting page down. I'm going through hundreds of these YouTube videos. And they're all videos where the word vegan either appears in the title or in the description. And there isn't a single one related to Wayne going to jail, Wayne's court case. There isn't a single one related to DXE, Direct Action Everywhere, Wayne's Foundation, Wayne's organization. Absolutely nothing. And as you're going down the list, I think YouTube orders these by how relevant they are to your search inquiry. They're not in chronological order. They're not in alphabetical order. They're in order of salience. And I'm getting, recipe videos, fitness videos, whatever, yoga videos, and you're getting less and less directly related to the search inquiry. And then I get this video result pop up for Christspiracy. Right. Here's the problem. Whether you're looking at this in terms of atheism and the prospect of improving the world as a whole through atheism, the prospect of improving Israel, Jerusalem through atheism, but I'm also really sincerely concerned about the future of New Orleans. I'm sincerely concerned about the future of places like Las Vegas and Los Angeles too. It's just false to pretend that we have solved the problem in the United States of America or in Canada. I'll give you a real quick example. Look up a map of schools in the city of New Orleans and now show all the Catholic schools and now show all the Protestant schools, show all the religious schools just as dots on a map. And now look at what percentage of children are getting religious education in school, right? Apart from the question of who's going to what church. And now ask yourself how you're going to feel if there are an equal number of Muslim schools and so on, which is, part of the way the world is changing. Multiculturalism means there are Muslim schools and Buddhist schools competing in our societies alongside Catholic schools and Protestant schools. That's the education system we all signed up for, and it's a system we all compete in unequally with unequal outcomes. We have school systems where people are raised being taught that the theory of evolution is only a theory. Theory of evolution is real. That the world is flat. They're taught about the afterlife. They're taught about human sexuality through a religious lens from birth, and that is happening in New Orleans. It's happening in Los Angeles. It's happening in Las Vegas. Places where there's this kind of veneer of modern secular attitudes, right? And it's happening in Jerusalem, and it's happening in Israel. Okay. Here's the thing. Within the last 20 years, I'm now 45 years old, so I can look back at 20 years is a good period of time for me to look back at it, frankly. There was a surge of interest in atheism, right? But that surge of interest, that fad came and went. And when I say something's a fad, it's not necessarily a negative thing. But, jazz music right now is not a fad. There's a certain level of interest in jazz music, and it's consistent. And I would point out there are universities where jazz music is taught. There are museums there are sort of solid institutions, not to mention nightclubs and concert halls and what have you. These are multi-million-dollar institutions. If you think it's cheap, Look at how much it would cost you to open your own jazz club or concert facility, or to start a university or college, even high school level, providing education how to play jazz music, how to play the instruments, and so on. Okay, huge investments, huge long-term investments. Now, jazz is not popular, but it's also not a fad, right? Other things, there are other genres of music that are briefly tremendously popular and then disappear, and there is no museum for them, and there is no college program, there's no university, it's not taught in high school, so they don't have that institution building focus. But here's the most important part of all. Not the creation of tangible institutions, whether you are thinking of a church or a political party or a college or university program. It's the intangible networks of intellectuals who work together. That's what really changes the world. It's the salon. All right. Now, one way that people meet each other and become members of an intangible network of intellectuals is by taking classes together in a college. Like, oh, you were both studying jazz music, or the 10 of you were all studying jazz music together, and you got to know each other. That can be part of it. But you can have a college program that's completely intellectually bankrupt and is completely politically inert. And you can have a college program that's tremendously dynamic and produces these kinds of connections and collaborations between people who really do change the world within one generation, change the world within 10 years. Okay? So, look, atheism in the space of 20 years, it came and went as a fad. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can Google the 4 horsemen of atheism. Series of hit books, some slightly successful documentary movies. It was really the books rather than the movies that were hit. And then there was radio show after radio show interviewing the authors of these books. It was at the dawn of YouTube. It was really just as YouTube was emerging. And then YouTube and podcasts became part of this snowball for the atheist movement. Okay, the tangible side of that equation. Where today are the university programs, the college programs, even if we're just going to compare atheism to jazz music? And again, it's a price tag of millions of dollars here. Normally, when you look into those jazz foundations, you're going to find out who donated the money for them. I knew a guy who wrote for a jazz magazine. I remember nobody in this business makes money. Like since the 1930s. So back in the 1930s, there was money in jazz or something. Maybe as late as the 1960s. But he was saying, like, for many decades, all of jazz is on a charitable basis. There are people who donate money for the magazine and donate money for an annual festival or annual concert or something. Obviously, I think most ballet companies, most opera companies, they've also gone into this phase where it's really not a money-generating business anymore. It's just the appreciation of the art for its own sake. Okay, so I think everyone in this audience is going to agree with me that atheism, and let's even put it more broadly, the critique of religion, not even atheism. Okay, atheism is this broad, nihilism is this broad, nihilism is more narrow, nihilism is a subset within atheism, okay? But even broader than atheism is the critique of religion. What could be more important than the critique of religion? All right, jazz music. Jazz music is incredibly trivial. I would like to tell you, I know from direct experience, there is nowhere in the world I can study the critique of religion in university. And I tried for decades. And I'll just very brief, I don't want to make this about me, but I remember having emails back and forth with a couple of professors who were professors of cult studies. So again, it's a funny thing within the university. So that's not an atheist department. It's not a nihilistic department, but that's a department that sort of takes the perspective like, well, moderate religion is okay. The problem is, cults, that the cults are bad. We're going to engage in the critique of cults. And, most of the people showing up at their conferences, they're priests, they're members of whatever, they're members of mainstream religions, but who are willing to come together and, and very sagaciously and academically engage in the critique of what's wrong with these cults, with these examples of extreme religion, right? So this is my point. Critique of religion may be broader. But I assure you, there is nowhere in the world, not in Europe, not in Asia. There's a video up of me having an interview with a Buddhist studies department at a university in Taiwan recently, a couple months ago. Okay. There is nowhere I can even engage in the critique of religion let alone a really atheist or really nihilistic approach to religion. Nowhere in the world. Okay. Jazz music, you have some options, right? This produced institutions, durable institutions. Okay. So atheism came and went, and it didn't produce those institutions. It didn't produce an organized political movement that's changing the world right now, not even in Israel, let alone in the United States, in Louisiana, or what have you, right? And it also utterly failed to produce a network of linked intellectuals, a salon. You may or may not have heard this. There was this term several of the atheists jumped on, just as the atheist movement was dying or was collapsing, was shrinking in size. Quote, the intellectual dark web. Do you remember this marketing ploy? The intellectual dark web. If you know what the dark web is, okay, the dark web exists for pedophiles to exchange images of child pornography. The dark web exists so that people who are turned on by pictures of rotting corpses and dead bodies at car accidents, so they can trade pictures of that. That's what the dark web exists for. And then to some extent, people say it's used for bank fraud. People engaged in. I doubt it, because if you're serious about bank fraud, you don't do that in the dark web either. You'll get caught. But allegedly, some other criminal do it. Why would anyone want to promote themselves as the intellectual? Why compare yourself in the terms of the intellectual dark web? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because on some level, they recognize exactly what it is I'm preaching to you now. On some subconscious level, they realize that what really matters is that intangible network of intellectuals working together. That's what they yearn for also, or that's what they wish they already had, right? And they don't. It's a lie. They have a podcast, they have a YouTube channel, right? And many of these people have a PhD and have a good income. Many of them have millions of dollars in donations. Okay. So atheism didn't have to be a fad in the last 20 years. It was. It came and went. I think I don't need to repeat myself for veganism in the last 20 years. Do any of you in the audience now want to freak out and say, what are you talking about, bro? There are just so many universities where you can study vegan politics. There are so many universities where you can study vegan philosophy. Bro, even vegan cuisine, even vegan nutrition, it's a joke. It's pathetic. And I've looked at everything. I really have. I've looked at a vegan baking school in Texas. I've looked at the darkest corners of the world. Whether you're talking about nutrition or like the athletic side of it, the fitness side of it, exercise side of it, or cooking, baking, but you want to talk about politics, ethics, philosophy. Oh, bro, have I shown you the program to study jazz music? Like, there's no comparison. The problem is not that the stupid people outnumber us, okay? The problem is not that the stupid people in absolute numbers are so much greater than the smart. The problem is that the stupid people are organized, and their organizations have staying power, have durability. They will last and last and last while our fads come and go. So what do we see now as the third and final chapter of the Christspiracy saga unfolds? Right? I knew a lot of vegans, well, I could say 10 years ago, really 8 years ago now, who wanted to think that the religious aspect of veganism was a fad that would come and go. The presence of bizarre Christian hippies, bizarre Hindu hippies, bizarre Buddhist hippies in some cases, people who had ridiculous religious beliefs, they thought the vegan movement was like a muffin, and that these religious nutcases were just like chocolate chips in the muffin. Okay. And what you find out as time goes on is, no, dude, it's the other way around. Okay. The sane secular people the atheist people, the nihilistic people with modern progressive attitudes, we are the minority. And guess who has the staying power? Guess who has the organization? Guess who, with the passage of time, whether it's 20 years or 200 years, can completely devour all of the work you've done and take it over? It's the crazy Christian people. And for so on for all the other religions. All right. The people, I'm sorry, just very briefly, I think you guys all know this. If Jesus Christ had wanted to preach veganism, right? The imaginary pseudo-historical figure, Jesus Christ, the fictional character, Jesus Christ, he could have said the words, don't eat meat. He could have said, stop eating meat. The New Testament could contain the statement, nobody should eat meat. If he wanted you to not kill animals, he could have preached in the Sermon on the Mount, you should stop killing animals. There is nothing like that in the New Testament tradition. There was nothing like that in the Old Testament tradition. I'm not going to launch into a lengthy exegesis here. On some level, everyone knows there are religions with a positive connection to vegetarianism, sometimes closer to veganism. Whether you think of that as Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, everyone knows that. Okay? It is a laughable subculture within Christianity that claims that the ancient original teachings of Christ, the ancient original Christianity, normally evoking the memory of the Essenes and the Nazarenes and this kind of thing, that the ancient original form of Christianity, as Jesus really wanted to be, was secretly vegan, was secretly vegetarian, was secretly in favor of animal rights and kindness and not cruelty. Okay. That is a crazy, laughable, tiny subculture within Christianity. And I could now repeat myself about the crazy, laughable, tiny subculture that exists within Judaism. Okay? Because there are people who are Jewish religious maniacs who believe in Judaism. And you ask them, well, gee, if it's really your theory that Moses wanted you to be vegan, why isn't it there in the list of 10 commandments? Why doesn't Moses just say, hey, you should be vegan, you should stop? And of course, they have their own crazy theoretical explanations. You don't want to get in this conversation, be my guest. Get on Reddit, get whatever, wherever you're going to have this conversation with these people, okay? But that tiny minority within Christianity is enormous compared to people like myself. All right? The number of religious maniacs, enormous. The amount of money supporting the religious maniacs, enormous. And remember, it's not just donations that are given today and tomorrow and the next day. The religious maniacs have the accumulated donations of centuries from the past. This includes the Mormons, but it includes the Christians, the Jews, the Muslims, right? They have, people die, your grandparents die, and they leave their money to the church. This has happened over and over again for centuries. Even if you look back decades, the accumulated donation of decades, a lot of people, a lot of money. And the tiny minority within that, within Christianity, within Judaism, right, who want to advocate for veganism, they are enormous. They outnumber people like myself, and they have way more money, way more institutional depth, institutional strength, right, and way more staying power than people like myself. So as this documentary, Christspiracy, comes out, preaching the most laughable nonsense. Okay? Today of all days happens to be the day when I compare the number of YouTube videos eagerly anticipating the release of this new crazy Christian documentary movie, crazy Christian pro-vegan movie, and encouraging you to donate money. I forget if it's Kickstarter or whatever, but they're accepting donations to support the publication and distribution of this movie. And I compare that to the number of people who care, the number of people who are even aware that Wayne Seong has handcuffs on, that he is in a prison cell in Sonoma, California right now. If the vegan movement is your movement, you have to fight for its future or get out. I have one Israeli friend. He does not feel that the future of Israel is his future. He does not feel that Israel is his country, and he is not going to fight for the future of Israel. He's getting out. All right? Now, if I were in his position, I wouldn't make the same decision he's making. Okay? But I'm not. And it's his decision to make, and I respect it. It's a choice really each person has to make for himself. I am not in a position to preach to him that he should make a compromise with the government of Benjamin Netanyahu and fight for the future of Israel. No, no. This is about how you feel, what you want to do with your life on planet Earth, and who you want to be 5 years from now. Okay, that's why the word "if" is very important in the sense. If Israel is your nation, if Israel is your country, if the government of Israel is your government, if the future of Israel is your future, all right? However you want to put this. If, okay? Then you have to fight for it. If the vegan movement is your movement, you have to fight for its future.